Rodney McAlpin here. Welcome to my channel. I want to thank everyone for going to my Henderson video that I posted a few weeks ago and clicking on like and subscribe. This video will be about a 1978 Harley SX250 Enduro that I found laying in a cow pasture and rescued it, or restored it, whichever one you would prefer to use, but I prefer rescued. The video will show you all the steps to doing it and what it took and how long it took. So I hope you like this video. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the like button. Thank you so much. As I said in the introduction, this is a 1978 Harley SX250 Enduro. They were built in the Aramaki factory by Harley Davidson, who actually owned the factory, so therefore this is a true Harley Davidson motorcycle, even though they are called Aramakis. This style of motorcycle was started in 1974 after they bought the factory. 78 was the last year Harley produced any of the small motorcycles. They sold the whole division to Cagiva. At the end of 1975, the frame was changed, the seat was shortened, they did away with the flip-up seat, they changed the airbox, moved the battery, and made the seat quite a bit longer. Also in 1976, the handlebar controls were changed to more of a Harley-style control system. In 2018, I was looking for a new project bike. A friend told me he thought he knew where there was a Harley that was in the field someplace. It took us a little bit, but we actually found it. It was laying in that field for over 25 years. The owner's son had been riding a motorcycle when it quit. He just propped it up against a tree and walked off and left it. My friend Buddy Blackwell and I went to a 10-acre lot and began to look for the motorcycle after we had received permission from the owner to do so. To speed the process up, Buddy searched one side of the lot and I searched the other. There was this wooded area I had walked by 5 or 6 times. You couldn't find anything. And then I turned around to tell Buddy, let's go, and the sun glinted off of something in the bushes, and I said, uh-oh. I went back and started tearing into the debris, and there it was. So the photo you're looking at now is the way we found the bike. After I pulled some of the weeds and debris off of the top, what the light hit was the speedometer glass. The motorcycle was so entangled in the weeds, you couldn't even stand it up. In the next video here, you will see me cutting away the debris, the brush, with a set of loppers. And it took quite a while, and at one time I thought I saw a snake and even jumped back. It wasn't a snake, it was just some trash. Oh well, we got the bike out. Hope you enjoyed this little short. You know, it had been laying there for 25 years. I never expected the bike to be so grown into the brush. It was terribly difficult to stand up. Laying on its side helped it in some regards, in other regards it made it worse. The side cover it was laying on was almost completely corroded away and had to be replaced. I couldn't find the correct one, so I just used one that was similar to it. After I got it stood up, I tried to roll it. There's no way that thing was going to roll. Both wheels were locked completely up. The chain was frozen. The bike was not going to move. We wound up having to pick it up and bring it out of the woods. At this point, I began to have second thoughts, wondering if this bike was even worth trying to salvage. You must admit, it looks pretty rough, even from this side view, but it met one category that I have to have before I take a bike on to restore, and that is if most of the parts were there. And in this case, 90% of the parts were there. As you see the bike being moved with the excavator, leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done had you found a motorcycle in this condition and wanted to fix it. Now this motorcycle really wasn't free. It cost me a battery, repairing a tractor, and bush hogging for a day and a half on the whole field that the motorcycle was laying in. Given the rarity of the motorcycle, I still thought this was probably worth the effort. Well, now back at my work area, namely my garage, I needed to do several things. First, I needed to get the bike where you could move it, in other words, make it roll. Secondly, I needed to assess the condition of the engine and the frame and the electrical. And thirdly, see what parts were there, what parts were missing, and what I needed to find. Well, I started by removing the gas tank, the seat, and the rear wheel. The rear wheel was a bit of a challenge. It took 3 hours to get the axle out of the wheel. It was completely rusted shut and couldn't roll. It wouldn't do anything. Alright, this is the back brake drum, the backing plate for the brake shoes, and the drive sprocket. The brake shoes on the brake backing plate were completely rusted to the brake drum and had to be forced apart. Now, this is a rear wheel assembly. The rim was almost completely rusted through. The spokes, they weren't any good. They were seized. The hub had bad bearings. The tire was rotten. All of this stuff had to be replaced. After I got everything apart, I got it free enough that I could reinstall it temporarily and put it back on the bike so I could put the bike on the motorcycle lift and begin taking other things apart, such as the engine side covers. Well, here you see the left side cover removed. You see the stator, rotor, the countershaft sprocket, and the oil injection pump. All this stuff had to be removed and cleaned up. In regard to the oil pump, it was learned as we tore it down that the shaft that turned the oil pump did not work. The speedometer drive unit was driven from the oil pump shaft, and it had seized and had stripped out the gears on both the oil pump and the speedometer drive, and so a replacement had to be found. On the right hand side of the motorcycle, as I removed that cover, the clutch cover, I found that because it was laying on that side, all the water that entered the engine collected in there. It rusted and ruined a lot of the parts. Here you can see the inside of the clutch cover and some of the clutch plates after they were removed. Because the bike was completely laying on its side, a lot of the oil had drained out through a hole in the cover that used to adjust the clutch with. The clutch cover had a hole in it from corrosion. Even though a good many of the parts were pretty corroded and rusted, you can see here that the inner case wasn't in too bad a shape. Up until now, I've had pictures to show you to go along with the audio, but there's a lot of stuff you need to know about the bike that I don't have pictures to illustrate. So we're just going to leave a generic picture there, and I'm going to give you the audio to let you know where we were at and how we got there. In this picture, you see the engine together in the frame. In essence, this is when we were just putting it back together in order to figure out what else we needed to do. The engine did have to be pulled out of the frame and completely tore down. After the engine cases were disassembled, the gears checked out okay in the transmission, and the crankshaft checked okay. However, the piston was busted, and the cylinder was scored, and that's what caused the bike to quit to begin with. After the engine was stripped down, the engine cases were split, the transmission was checked, the gears were okay, the connecting rod was checked on the crank, and the crank was okay, the crank bearings were okay. However, the crank seals were not and had to be replaced. After we started putting it back together, the clutch hub assembly was cleaned, all the clutch plates were sanded, and everything checked to make sure it was okay. In regard to the clutch assembly, a new clutch cable had to be made as I couldn't find one. The new side cover, or the clutch adjusting cover, was replaced. I couldn't find the correct one, which was a 78 model. I found a 76 that works, but it doesn't have Harley Davidson engraved in it. As a clutch side was being reinstalled, new crankshaft seal was installed, new gaskets were cut, the clutch cover was bead blasted, it was wet sanded all the way down to 1200 grit sandpaper and then polished. That's how it became to look like it does now. Back on the left side of the engine, the rotor was removed, the stator was removed, and all the pickups were removed for the ignition. The rotor was bead blasted so that it looks good, as you will see in some of the other pictures. The left cover was also bead blasted and then wet sanded down to 1200 grit and then polished also. So that's to get all the corrosion and oxidation off. The left side cover was reinstalled after everything was made correct. As I said earlier, the piston, the rings had broken, scored the cylinder, and messed up the cylinder. Even though the connecting rod was fine, the top end had to be replaced. I found and ordered a new replacement cylinder and piston, but when I got it, I found that piston was also cracked and was about to break. I contacted Wiseco Pistons to see if they could make me a new piston, and they said no, but he knew somebody who had pistons and had ordered 12 of them, and so I contacted him and wound up purchasing one of those. After I received the new piston, it was from Maryland, I took the cylinder and sent it off to Wisconsin with the piston and had the cylinder nickel sealed to fit the piston. Now I had a cylinder that matched the piston, but I didn't have the correct rings. The rings I had were for a chrome plated cylinder, and a nickel sealed cylinder has to have a special ring. It's softer. So I contacted Wiseco Pistons again, talked to my man there, and he was able to order me a set of the correct rings of the right hardness to work with the nickel sealed cylinder. Now I had all the stuff to put the cylinder back together. Now with the top end all sorted out, I turned my attention to the carburetor. The original carburetor was a Del Orto. They're not known to be a very good carburetor to begin with, and this one had broken parts. I ordered some parts from eBay, got them in, and installed them. It turned out this carburetor did not work and had to be replaced, so I put a 34mm Mikuni on there, and I had done this before, and it works great. I also had to order an airbox. The bike did not have an airbox on it, so I ordered an airbox, an air filter, and a cover. I also had to order the right side cover for the bike. I found a new old stock for a Cagiva for the next year model. I was able to get it and then repaint it to match the bike. Of course, the bike had to be painted anyway. While I was waiting on parts to be sent back or to be sent off and returned, I went ahead and started on the sheet metal stuff. I bead-blasted the tank and both fenders and the seat pan. Then I made repairs to all three. The rear fender was in pretty bad shape. The tag bracket was about rusted away. I actually found some new old stock and purchased it and painted it to match. And all told, it took about 2 months to paint the bike. As you can see, the old original fender still had some red paint left on it. I was able to match that and then use that color to paint the rest of the bike. All the parts got 2 coats of epoxy primer, 1 coat of primer, 1 coat of black or 2 coats of black, and then 3 or 4 coats of red. And then decals were installed. I was able to find a set of reproduction decals from a man on eBay online. After the side cover, 2 fenders and the tank had been painted and the decals installed, it got 6 coats of clear to hide the decals. Here you can see the painted parts being trial fitted back on the bike. After the painting was completed, I turned my attention to the seat. It was in pretty bad shape. On eBay, I located a replacement seat cover that was supposed to fit. However, it turned out it only fit 75 and 76 models, not the 78, which was a much longer seat. I didn't discover the issue with the seat until after I ordered the seat cover and it came in. The man was in the Canadian military, and it took me almost a month to get the first seat cover. It was a tricky ordeal to get the seat cover replaced because I had to work through eBay's online comments section. I finally got the man's phone number. It turns out he was in the Canadian military, and he was about to go for summer camp. He was going to be gone for 2 weeks. He told me if I'd send him the measurements when he got back, he'd make me a new seat cover, as I requested. You can see that the first seat cover was about 10 inches too short, and then I measured the width and length, and the style was from the drawing I got from the service manual. Here you can see the finished seat. I think it turned out pretty well. The only thing was, I had to pay for shipping to send the one that didn't fit back to Canada, and then I had to pay for shipping for the new one to come back to me. So all in all, this seat cover cost me about $150. Now the one thing we didn't talk about was how to recondition the foam. I had to sand off all the discolored and rotten foam and then added to it 1 inch of new foam. and then shape it with the grinder in order to get the right contours. The new seat cover was attached with 3M spray foam glue and some hot glue from a hot glue gun. One thing that seems to be consistent with trying to restore an Italian-made motorcycle is the fact that these guys don't know how to chrome plate very well. The wheels are always rusted and almost rusted through. That was the case with this 250. I had to replace both rims and the spokes on this bike. The spokes I was able to get from Buchanan Spokes. They still had a pattern for those, and they were fairly easy to get. Cost about $100. The rims, well, I went back on rims versus the chrome plated steel rims because I didn't want to have any more problems. I just found some rims at a swap meet that had the right number of holes and then made them work. I have a tool I can use to adjust the spoke nipple holes so that they will work with any style of rim. Here you can see the rear rim. It still has a tire on it and the spokes. The spokes I was able to pick up from Buchanan. They still had the pattern and I was able to get stainless steel spokes. The rim was replaced with an aluminum rim I found in a swap meet. I have a tool that lets me adjust the spoke nipple holes so that I can set them to the angle of the spokes for the particular wheel I'm trying to put it on. In this picture you can see the finished front wheel and rear wheel assemblies after they had been new spokes laced into them, that had new tires put on them, and they were balanced. Many other things on this bike had to be repaired, such as the speedometer and the tachometer. They both had to be completely dismantled and cleaned and put back together. I even had to buy one glass to put in one that broke. The ignition system was bad. I had to get and put in a Chinese ignition system because the Harley CDIs are no longer available. Plus, I was scared to buy a used one and put on there. It might just quit anyway. The Chinese stuff worked really well. The muffler also had to be cut open and cleaned and put back together because it was stopped up. Well, in 1978 was the end of the small bikes for Harley Davidson, and they really didn't have anything other than that for dirt bikes until recently. So right after I had finished the work on this 250, the Pan America came out. One was delivered to our Harley shop, so I put them nose to nose. So what you have was the last generation of their dirt bike versus the new generation of their dirt bike or dual sport bike or adventure bike, whatever you would like to call these things. But I thought it was just fun to look at. Well, again, here's the finished product. I think it was well worth the time and effort and the money because these bikes are pretty rare now. And then now we're going to do a memorial. The previous owner of this bike, who goes by the name of Bird and is a mechanic or was a mechanic at the Harley shop in Jackson, Mississippi. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2022. He was a dear friend, and I miss him very much. So, Bird, I hope you look down and smile at the work that was done to this bike, a bike that you were a part of for many years and will always be remembered as such. This Harley 250 78 model can be seen at the Harley Davidson dealer in Jackson, Mississippi, where it's always on display. Also, it's taken around and shown at many motorcycle events, including the Barber Vintage Festival and the Vicksburg Bike Show. I hope you see it there. I would just like to say that this bike is not a trailer queen. It is actually ridden and ridden quite often at many of the events that you will be seeing us at in the near future. Well, Rodney McAlpin here again with the bike. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want you to know it took about a year and a half to do this rescue on this motorcycle. I also want you to remember to click on the like button and to click on the subscribe button as you leave out. And I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you go find a bike and give it a go yourself.